How's it going, guys? It's Mr. Marvel here, and this is going to be the very first video in my Marvel channel. Now, in case you don't realise, you may recognise me from Mr. Shax, which is my other gaming channel. I decided to start this channel simply because it's my love for Marvel films. You know, everything Marvel is just, since day one, it was just a hook. But anyway, enough of the waffling. This is going to be my top 5 theories on the upcoming Loki television series. Now, in case you haven't realised, the Loki is the new Disney Plus show, which is going to start streaming in June. So obviously, if you've seen WandaVision, if you've seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you'll know what I'm talking about here. But without further ado, I've come up with 5 interesting theories as to what could possibly happen in the Loki television series. So, starting off at number 1, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Is it possible that Loki may find a way to survive this at the end of it? Who knows? I personally think, what with everything going, so of course if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame, well, for a start, A, you're living under a rock, and B, how could you not? Loki dies. Yeah, Loki dies in Infinity War. He finally couldn't lie any longer and finally met his match at the hands of Thanos. Thanos crushes his windpipe after Loki tries one too many tricks with him, and it just doesn't cut any mustard, and yeah, he dies. And it was a bit of a kick in the nuts, really, with the character arc, because Loki's gone from this jealous brother, you know, wants to take over the world, wants to enslave the world, you know, tries to in Avengers Assemble, and then to go through that whole sort of redeeming character arc all the way through the Dark World and Ragnarok, only to finally, when we have the chance to see him flourish, it's stumped out by Thanos, and it was pretty gut-wrenching, to be honest. I mean, it was up there with some of the worst deaths for me, in my opinion, but yeah, so the big question everyone's sort of thinking is, now that Loki has stolen the Tesseract in Endgame, does he still technically count as being alive? Because in one way or another, he is still technically dead, but in this, he is technically alive. It's quite a hard one to get your head around, because if you look at it from two distinctions, is this an alternate timeline now that the branches have been broken, or is this just a case of he's simply just wandering into his inevitable death in Infinity War? Is his knowledge of the organisation that he's working with now, is it going to completely change is he going to have a change of heart? Is he going to try everything to avoid it? My personal theory is, obviously, this is the Loki you are looking at when he was at his height of his villainy. Like, he wasn't this reformed Loki that you see near the end of Ragnarok or in the start of Infinity War. You know, he is still plain bad, so you still have to sit there and think, yeah, he's going to try and get out of this any way he can. He's going to try and manipulate time, or he's going to try and avoid it completely. And at the end of the day, he might not. I personally think at the end of the day, I think he's going to have to face facts that his death is somewhat a fixed point. Because obviously the MVA have sort of slaved Loki to fix these points in time, which he may inadvertently not damaged himself. Because then if you think back to what the Chosen One said to Bruce Banner in Endgame, all these long branches that break off, one little decision that you make, one little difference that you do can affect it forever. So for me personally, I think as much as we'd like to see more Loki, I think sort of the pure levelness of Loki, like Tom Hiddleston's actor, like obviously how much he's been doing, I personally think he won't sign on to do any more films. I think after this television series, that'll be it. Like, he will have to find some way to face up to his death and just live with it, as to the excess term, which is sad, but it might be a bit of a choker. Anyway, moving on to theory number 2. This one is a bit more far-fetched, but I quite like it as one I kind of thought of myself. And the question is, with all the places that Loki's going to visit, like we saw in the trailer, that he goes back to the Battle of New York, the same as the Avengers did in Endgame. You can see he goes back to, like some weird settings like the 60s, and some of it looks like the Middle Ages. It's quite hard to tell from the video, but is there a small chance that in going back to these points, will he inadvertently bump into Captain America? Now, you're probably going to bite my head off for this one, but there's no stupid version of this, because if you think about it, Steve Rogers at the end of Endgame uses the Quantum Realm to return the Infinity Stones back to their original places. Now, a lot of the time, there are sort of corresponding areas where Loki and Captain America could technically be in the same time zone, or even bump into each other. It's a bit of an out there one, but just let me roll with it. He has to go back to the Battle of New York, which obviously the Avengers are, but at the same time, the Avengers go back to there as well. So there could be a small chance that they could end up crossing paths, because if you think about it, there'll be two Lokis in the same area, and there'll also be two Captain Americas in the same time zone. You've got the current Captain America, which was fighting the Battle of New York, the Captain America that went back to return the stones. In fact, if you think about it, there could be three Captain Americas at some point. One that went to return the stones, one that went to steal the stones, and one that was just there in that time zone. But then you still could have two Lokis. You could have the Loki that left with the Tesseract, the Space Stone, but then you could also have the Loki who was going back to try and fix it. So you've got this great big garble of information where it could just completely zoom up. And then if you think about it, they could also meet on other planets as well, because you think about where the Ether, which is the reality stone, Loki was around it a lot of the time as well. When you think about it, he was imprisoned on Asgard at the time where it was there, so surely Captain America would have had to go back to Asgard at some point to try and return the Ether to whoever had it at the time there. I think he'd have to return it to Jane or wherever it was originally, but then Loki is there as well. So surely you think in Captain America winding up these time events, surely Loki would have to go back to some of these as well. But it's a bit of a far-fetched one, really, but it could happen. I mean, it's very unlikely. I mean, they're not going to throw in Chris Evans as a surprise cameo to go in there, because that would just be incredible, and just be probably not in budget, because this is probably costing an arm and a leg as it is to do. So it's that's another one of the theories which it could happen, but I'm not quite sure if it would. So the third theory that I've got for the Loki series is there a possibility that learning through the TVA about the use of the Infinity Stones, will Loki try to go after them himself? It's another interesting theory, but might not be necessarily relevant to the story. I mean, the general gist of what the synopsis looks like for Loki is forced by the TVA to undo the damage that is done through time, not just by him, but by other people looking to disrupt the flow of time. But it's quite interesting. If you look through the video and the trailer, you do see certain parts of previous films that do hint towards this. You see halfway through the trailer, looks like Loki's fighting soldiers from the Nova Corps. And in case you don't know what the Nova Corps are the military organisation / the planet which first appeared in Guardians of the Galaxy, which were the original keepers of the Power Stone. They kept the Power Stone safe at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, but then ultimately met their demise at Thanos. You don't see it on screen, you only hear about it briefly at the start. Thanos goes to the Nova Corps, to Nova Prime, and basically eradicates them all to get to the Power Stone. But it does look like that he is fighting Nova Corps soldiers in that thing, so maybe he learns of the Power Stone, he learns of the other Infinity Stones, and wants to grab them for himself to see that he could change the universe to his vision, whatever twisted and strange that may be. But then you also see near the end as well that he's sitting on a rock with what looks like Black Widow and the Soul World. Now, obviously, obviously spoiler alert, big spoiler alert here, that Black Widow does end up killing herself so that Hawkeye can get the Soul Stone in Avengers Endgame, because obviously the sacrifice is a soul for a soul. And it looks like as if Loki and Black Widow are sitting chatting on this rock. And does it look like has he gone to the Soul World, or has he found some way to get to Voromir in order to try and get his hands on the Soul Stone, unwillingly not knowing what he has to do? Because it's very unlikely, obviously choosing from the two, I don't think Loki would have any qualms with throwing Black Widow off a cliff in order to get his hands on the Soul Stone. But again, that causes lots of continuity errors, lots of ripples in time. Again, it's all a very big mishmash. I mean, if you thought WandaVision was confusing, Loki looks like it's just gonna throw that out the water completely and just try and flip it on its head. And it's why I'm interested in this series the most, because Loki is obviously still my favourite villain / character. He's got the best character arc, I think, out of a lot of the characters. Obviously, you've got the original Avengers. You've got Iron Man, from selfish playboy billionaire to lead the Avengers and hero, and obviously you've got Captain America, weedy little kid from Brooklyn who turns out to be the super soldier and goes back and marries his supposed sweetheart. They've all got sort of interesting-ish character arcs, but Loki's one's more interesting in my opinion. But yeah, that is quite an interesting fact, because obviously he's in these trailers, he goes back to lots of areas where there are Infinity Stones. Goes back to the Battle of New York. He goes to what looks like the Nova Corps. He looks like what he goes to the Soul World to find the Soul Stone. It's all very interesting facts you can't help but pick up on. But again, all of these theories or ideas that I have could all be incredibly wrong. But who knows? They could be right. But yeah, it does look like an interesting way in which they can go. So my sort of fourth theory that I'm leaning towards, in which I think could be a thing, is the TVA the work of Kang the Conqueror? Now, obviously, from the comic perspective, Kang the Conqueror is the big bad in equivalence to Thanos and Galactus. But Kang the Conqueror is very different, is that he had a very strange start, which was ultimately brought about by the Avengers and the Infinity War saga. In the comic books, through the actions of the Avengers and restoring time through the Infinity Gauntlet and the stones, they inadvertently cause so much damage to the time-space continuum and so, that through alternate realities and branches, Kang the Conqueror is born. Kang the Conqueror gets his motives, his ideas, his genius, and his ultimate sort of will to destroy the Avengers and sort of rule the planet and the Earth. Because from what you can see at the start of the Loki trailer in the TVA offices, the sculptures do kind of look like adaptations of Kang the Conqueror. You sort of don't see it very often, but once you see them sort of moulded very slowly, you can sort of see the resemblance to Kang the Conqueror. But it's interesting whether Owen Wilson's character might be Kang the Conqueror in disguise, or maybe in a normal form where he can manipulate people easier, or maybe it's a case that he's running it from behind the scenes and Owen Wilson's character is just there, like he's just the fall guy. But it's an interesting theory that I sort of sussed out through looking at the synopsis of the Loki trailer and look at the story and how it could all possibly fit together. Because obviously Kang the Conqueror has been confirmed and cast to be the next big bad in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, I think that's how you pronounce it. Quantumania, I think that's it, Quantumania, yeah. So it's interesting whether this is the start of it all. This is how we finally, because obviously the TVA have got the ability to walk into any time zone they see. Like, you can clearly see that as how they managed to pluck Loki from wherever he goes. So it's a very interesting theory as to where that could possibly go. It's one that I'm willing to believe, but again, that's the beauty of Marvel and the cinematic universe and the writing and the directing. It's it leads you to believe one thing, but in the end they completely flip it on their head, and that's the beauty of it. That's why people enjoy watching these sort of thinking and theorising between their mates and their friends, because it's so much to dissect. You just don't know where the direction it could go. But it's a theory that I'm willing to believe, but of course you have to wait until June 11th to see if it actually does come to fruition. But I'm fairly confident that this is the origins of Kang the Conqueror, but who knows. And finally, the final theory that I'm doing for the Loki TV show is there a slim possibility that, of course this links back to the original one, will Loki be in Thor Love and Thunder? Now, a lot of the time you can't really have a Thor film without Loki, because he's just such a detrimental character to the show. I mean, that's what makes it brilliant and captivating and hilarious at the same time. I mean, you just look at Thor Ragnarok and the pure comic duo of Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston in character properly going at each other as adopted brothers is just brilliant. But then it's the question of, through all the shenanigans of the Loki television series, which Loki will we be seeing in Thor Love and Thunder? Will we be seeing the alternate Loki, where he's still completely evil, he still hates Thor's guts, and he still wants to rule the world? Or will we somehow manage to go back to the redeemed Loki, where he's compassionate and kind and actually likes his brother and actually wants to do good? It's a strange way in which it's going to go. There is a possibility that it could be, but not really much information has been leaked about Thor Love and Thunder yet, because obviously it's still in very... I mean, they've only just literally started filming the thing, so obviously they've got the story developed, but it's been very hush-hush, because obviously Thor Love and Thunder is mostly centred around Lady Thor, obviously being Jane Foster, and how she gets the power of Thor by wielding Mjolnir and gaining Thor's powers. So it'll be interesting to see how far they actually go with Loki's character arc in the TV series. Will they simply resort him back to where he's ended, which was in the death scene in Infinity War, or will, through some actions of the TVA or Loki's action or just general mischief, will he somehow manage to cheat death? Because obviously we know we can spot a Loki illusion from quite a far way away. I mean, there are quite big pointers now, because obviously a lot of people have dissected the real Loki from the illusion Loki, because obviously everyone knows that Loki holds his dagger with his right hand, but a lot of the illusions that you see in the Dark World and obviously Ultimate Infinity War, he holds it with his left hand, which is always an illusion. So it's interesting to see, will Loki send an illusion back to his death scene so that he can carry on his mischievous ways, or will he simply just face up to the facts that he has to die? So it's interesting to see if he will make it to Love and Thunder, or whether that will be the setup for another Thor film. Who knows? But I am going to leave this video at that. I hope you've enjoyed this very first video. So hope you bear with me there with some of the theories. Some of them are a bit wild. Some of them may be true, but we can't wait to see, especially me, what happens. Thank you very, very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Mr. Marvel for more videos. I will be doing more videos on this soon. I'll be coming up with Black Widow theories. I'll be coming up with top 10 characters, top 10 villains, and top 10 scenes. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I will see you very, very soon. Thank you.